Hello and welcome to the 7th episode of the Tiger Project.
Today we talk with Coco and myself about the AAPI History Month.
We talk about everything from their personal experience in the U.S. being Asian Americans to how to best celebrate AAPI month. I hope you enjoy. Okay, so my first question is just, can you introduce yourself and kind of like what your role is at GCDS?
Okay, so hi, my name is Coco Motoyoshi. I'm the leader and founder of Asian Culture Club with Olivia Hu at the Greenwich Country Day High School.
Amazing.
Hi, so my name is Evan. I help with the Asian Culture Club. I participate a lot in it. And I am also one of the co-founders of our school podcast.
Yeah. Okay, amazing. So this episode is centered around Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So I just have a question about kind of what is this month? When was it established? By who? Why do people celebrate it?
Okay, so Asian American Pacific Islander Month is celebrated during the month of May to talk about the contributions Asians have made to America. AAPI month was created by Jianni Zhu in the 1970s, so it's been going on for a really long time.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And I guess I'm just curious, like, what this month means to you.
To me?
Yeah.
Well, this month, it's just doing like Asian like cultural activities, like trying to like unite people. Like there's so much division. I just having the unison and doing like activities is like a great way to like unite people.
And to me, I feel like in addition to what Coco said, it's also a way for me to kind of celebrate my own heritage. And for example, oftentimes living in the US, I don't really learn or I don't participate that much in my own culture. And this way it's kind of fun to kind of take part in it.
Cool. And this is a bit of a tricky question. You don't have to be like history book, but could you just briefly explain kind of the history of Asians in America?
Okay, so Asians have a long history in the United States. Asians have come during like the 20th century, and a lot of them like came to the West Coast. Majority of them in California.
Yeah.
That's actually where my like my dad's side, like they reside in California, which is kind of interesting. To this day, many Asians they immigrate to the United States to achieve the American dream, whether that's like starting a business, getting the best education, or being part of like the entertainment industry.
Yeah, like Coco said, Asians have a very long history in the US. Actually, the Chinese were the only group of were the only group of people to ever be excluded from being able to immigrate here.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So I think that's pretty deeply woven into Asian Americans' history. But aside from that, I think Coco said all of it.
So this brings me on to our next question. Both of you guys have lived in Asia and then lived in the United States. So I was just curious about kind of the biggest cultural differences, and just your experiencing living there.
There's a lot to unpack.
Yeah. Okay, so in general, I think Asia, it puts more emphasis on like collectivism and like everyone like doing something as a whole. But I think in America, it's more like the individuality and like uniqueness of like each person. So I think that's like the major cultural difference.
Yeah.
I agree with that completely. I think after living in Hong Kong and then moving here at an older age, I kind of noticed the fact that in the US there is a really strong emphasis on being individual, on your individual liberties, your creativity, and especially the freedom of speech.
Yeah.
I think protests I'm from Hong Kong, so I know a thing or two about protesting. Protests are one of the biggest things that I think people may take for granted because in a lot of different parts in Asia, protesting is almost taboo because going against the group ideal is always, there's a lot of judgment when people do that. So I think in the US, just it's freedom, liberty. That's it.
And both of you guys have lived in Asia and then moved back to America. Like, what was your reason for going back to America? Do you know?
For me, it was just because of my dad's job.
Yeah.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
So you think it's like, it's a lot of it's moving to America is rooted in just opportunity?
I think historically that may have been it. Recently, there are more job opportunities opening up in the East because as nations become like more modernized, urbanized, job opportunities open up. I think in my case, I think it was just that my dad felt that my sister and I didn't have a good Western upbringing. He wanted us to experience what living in America is like rather than living our entire life in Hong Kong.
Interesting. And then, is it different being Asian in America versus being in Asia? Just like, how is that experience different?
Yeah, I would say it's pretty different.
Yeah.
I would say because I'm Asian American, but I grew up in like Connecticut. I went to this school until I was 12 years old, and then I came to Japan, and like even though like my ancestry is like Japanese, I learned a lot more about Asian culture and Japanese culture that I didn't know before. So, and I have some characteristics that are more American than others. Mm-hmm. So I think it's like a, unique experience.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's based on my mom's experiences and a few of my other friends. I think if you grew up in America, even if you're like full Chinese and then you went back to Asia, there's always a very big difference that people notice because you're more passion driven, you're driven by your passions more. You speak more, you talk about your opinions more, which is not really a thing in Asia.
Interesting.
For me, I think I have a different experience with Coco because I'm biracial. Mm-hmm. So in Asia, I'm always considered white, and then here I'm considered Asian, I guess.
Oh, so that's like interesting because in the States I'm considered Japanese, but in Japan I'm considered like American.
Yeah, that's a really interesting dynamic. So I was curious about Asian representation in media and how you guys have seen it kind of progress over time. What have you noticed about like the representation in
in the media?
Yeah.
Well, I think like in the past, like Asian representation, it was more like, oh, like all Asians do math and like all of them are smart, but like now it's like more, I feel like Asians are represented like in a like more variety, like we can be like, like sometimes Asian actors, they play like rude roles or like kind of sassy and like kind of scary roles, and I really love how the representation has become more expansive, which I think it's so great.
Yeah, I completely agree with Coco. I think maybe a few years ago or a couple decades ago, Asians representation wasn't really as diverse as it is today. Asians were generally either like the enemy or the smart sidekick. But I think my sister and I always have a joke that Asians are always the first to die in movies. But I think nowadays you do see Asians in all sorts of different media. I think we're being represented pretty well.
And just over time, how do you think different representation of Asian Americans or just Asian people in media has influenced or affected just different perspectives?
I mean, I think like the media definitely has a huge like effect on perspectives. Like depending on the person, they can look at like totally different information on like social media.
Yeah.
And the media can be kind of scary to me because like it creates like, I feel like it creates more like polarization.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a little, and information on social media, it's usually biased.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think social media is not a good place to gather your information. I think polarization was a really good point. Media creates drama because they earn money that way, and I think if the media is saying something bad about one group of people, or good, either way, not many people fact check, and I think that just completely changes one's perspective of a group of people. So for example, a few hundred years ago when the media was saying, oh, Asian immigration, this is bad for the United States or whatever, people didn't understand why people were moving here. They didn't understand the other group of people. And so I think media just really plays a big role in perception of people.
Yeah, and then building on this point of kind of just the toxic effects of media and how it just paints different individuals, what kind of misconceptions do you feel like you often find about Asian or Asian Americans, or things that people kind of stereotype you as?
That's an interesting question.
Yeah, I think it's very complicated. It's also pretty personal.
Well, I think that like when we say like Asian American, we tend to think of like, oh, like they're all from like this one country. They all speak the same language, or they all like have the same culture. But I think that but actually in reality, like Asia is such a big continent that like even if we look similar, the culture and like the language is like so different. So I think that's something that people get confused about.
Yeah, I think people forget that Asia literally incorporates like the South Asia, then Eastern Asia, and the Middle East are entirely different countries with extremely different cultures. And I think people often forget that. Maybe I think media has kind of shifted towards a focus on Eastern Asia without as much representation of the Middle East or South Asia. People even forget that like Indians or Pakistanis are Asian. People will say, "Oh, you're not Asian, you're Indian." Like, India is part of Asia.
Yeah.
I think COVID.
Yeah.
COVID is interesting because it brought attention to the fact that there is a lot of kind of uneasy feelings.
Yeah, because if you look at different studies that have been done, there's been a lot of negative attention brought to Asia for various different reasons. I would love to hear you talk more about that and your experience and your perspectives on people calling it the Chinese virus sometimes.
Should I answer this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
As a I don't feel that offended if I hear people say it's a Chinese virus, because it did come from China.
Yeah.
But I think the way people kind of add on to it is what annoys me. Like, people will say, oh, it came from China. They probably got it from eating bats. Like, not eating bats is not people don't really do that. And I think the biggest difference I've noticed is that my family no longer feels very safe. Like, for example, I used to go into New York City sometimes with my friends. And recently, my parents don't feel safe allowing me to go there because of rising Asian hate. And so my friend group we're all Asian. So we basically don't feel safe anymore going and like walking around the neighborhoods to maybe get bubble tea or something. That's the biggest thing I've noticed.
Yeah, like I feel like COVID has created more division between like race, nationality, ethnicity, and like politics. And I don't know, I wish we were at a place where like we can talk to people no matter like what identity they are.
Yeah.
And it's kind of sad to me how it's like it's 2021 and we're still like dealing with these like issues. And like I wish we can just like, no matter what our difference is, we can talk normally and not like divide people.
Yeah. And then my last question is, what is the best way to show support and or participate in AAPI?
Well, Asian Culture Club will be hosting a lot of activities during the rest of the month of May, including tomorrow, dumpling making in the cafeteria, and we have some movie night going on. And literally, this club is like open for anyone, so like you don't need like requirements. Like it's literally open to anyone. So if you have free time, like come join.
Yeah, I think just trying new cultures, trying new things, that's the biggest part of this month. We want to incorporate everyone. It helps people better understand each other, and I think that's one of the best ways to kind of reduce the polarizing country.
Okay, well, thank you guys. I really enjoyed that, and thank you for taking your time to talk with me.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so that is it for today's episode.
We hope you learned something new, and if you want to find out more or find out different ways to help support AAPI, we will be linking some websites in the description.
And I hope you tune in next time for the latest episode.
Thank you.